Welcome to the channel. So I'm just waiting at my job right now, and I've been listening over. I've been driving for about an hour and a half here, and last night as well, I was listening to different videos talking about this whole backyard break stuff. I'd watched a portion of the Sports Card Radio live stream. It was 8 hours, so I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched part of that, and then I've watched a bunch of videos. Dan the Cardman had a really good one, and there's a number of other videos. And then I've just been listening to different stuff, and it keeps popping up, and so it's just got me, wanting to share. And since I'm sitting here waiting, I figured might as well share some of my thoughts here. I feel like there's a lot of like armchair expert kind of dialogue going on with this that I feel is it's muddying the whole idea. So regarding the backyard breaks thing, I don't want to really repeat the same things that have been said over and over again, but there are a few things that I don't think have been said enough that to me like stand out as a couple of the key points from this whole process. I mean, for one, I don't think there's any way we can ever prove nefariousness or not nefariousness in this particular context. The math is enough to, I think, warrant further exploration, and I think that's what Sports Card Radio is trying to do, is just explore things. And I think that's something that generally as a hobby, it's good if we are exploring things and trying to find the truth behind things. So that's, the math was enough for that, but there's things about the math that make me feel like that it's not a real issue. I mean, even if the math had all the correct numbers, which it can't have, because you can't know the case numbers, you can't know how much money they're actually spending on product. There's so many things that are assumptions in those numbers that by itself makes me question a lot of the things. And then the other thing is the way that probabilities work, and in the way that the numbers are being used, where kind of like you could replace Cade Cunningham with anybody, seventh man off the bench, whoever happens to have one of ones, and the numbers would basically work out the same. So it's, the probability of those four is certainly very unlikely, but the probability of any four that you're making a comparison to is going to be equally unlikely. So I mean, I realize that those are like four of the biggest hits, but it's not that these kind of hits are unseen elsewhere. If you watch the IF Sports Card channel, I can't remember what it's called, but he has like weekly or bi-weekly, he has the biggest cards that have been pulled from breaks over that week. And like when the Cade Cunningham that was pulled by Fanatics, or that was pulled by Backyard Breakers, was pulled, that wasn't even the number one largest card broke that week. There was another one, another card, I can't even remember what it was now, that was even more valuable, that was pulled the same week. And if you follow along with his weekly breaks, you see, these kind of cards get pulled by a lot of different people. You don't see Backyard Breaks pop up on there. They do pop up on there plenty, but not more than what you would expect, considering the fact that they are like the biggest breaking platform. So, I feel like the probabilities, the way that the numbers were looking at the probabilities was looking at something so specific, and I don't think the numbers are telling the story that they seem to be telling. So that's one thing. Another thing is, like even if the numbers were correct, basically the numbers came to the estimation that you would need to spend about $40 million to have like a 0.5% chance to get these four cards. Well, if you're the biggest breaker in the world, especially focusing on high-end products like National Treasures, then it makes sense to me that you would be the one most likely to beat the odds for that sort of thing. So it also makes me think that just based on the math, I'm not so, I don't see a lot that would make me say like a smoking gun, like, yep, this is definitely nefarious. Now, I'm not trying to defend Backyard Breaks, because there's possibility that with historical perspective you can see what happened with other things, with the Trevor Lawrence thing, but that's not necessarily, I mean, that does speak to the potential for some lack of integrity, but at the same time, that's a completely different situation. That's a completely different scenario. One has nothing to do with the other, so you can't really just like, take their history and the dislike that you might have of their style and things like that, and and make it seem like they're doing something nefarious in this instance. Now, that being said, the other thing that I think is really important about this, whether there was nefariousness or not, and I think this is one thing that's barely been spoken about at all, is I feel like this is telling us more than anything that there needs to be more transparency on the business side of things from Panini specifically, and Topps and other card producers. I mean, the fact that we don't know how cards are produced, we don't know how cards are packed, we don't know if it's done by hand, we don't know if it's a machine, we don't know, we don't know the process of how that works, we don't know if they have a way to take note and notice if there, what specific card is in what specific box. We don't know. There's so many things we don't know. And then from that process, how that goes to a shipper, to a distributor, how it gets to the breaker eventually. Like, there's no transparency in the process, which creates a space where it looks, the optics of it look like there's hanky-panky, whether there is or isn't. And I think that's something that's built into the system the way it is right now that is not as healthy thing. I feel like if we shouldn't have to question this kind of thing, you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like if they gave a count, for example, if they said how many cases they produced overall, if you actually have some sort of like pack odds, the chances of getting a 1 of 1, or whatever, you actually have some transparency, and we know something about the factory process and the packaging process and the distribution, like how those go out to the distributors. If there's more transparencies in that process, then we don't have to question whether there's this kind of hanky-panky going on, because we can see, it'll be more clear to see. I always feel uncomfortable when something is built into a system that makes it easy for corruption to happen. Not that it's actually happening, but that it's easy for it to happen, and that there's incentive for it to happen, and that there's no real consequence, there's no real way of finding out if it's happening. And I feel like that's not something that should be within the industry, and I see that in a lot of different spaces. I've talked about that in relation to PSA and the way that they do their upcharging things. It's not that I expect, or not that I say that there's corruption, that they're giving higher grades in order that they can charge more money. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that that's absolutely happening, but I would say that they've built a system where they have financial incentive to be corrupt. And I don't feel, and they don't have any way, and there's no real way to, if they are corrupt, there's no real way to prove it. And there's no, there's no transparency in how the grading process works or anything. So because of that, it creates a system where corruption is easy to happen. There's no checks and balances to prevent corruption, and there's incentive for it to happen. So I feel the same way when I think about the the need for Panini and card producers to become much more transparent in their processes. So those are basically the two things I just wanted to mention in this video. I personally don't think in this instance there was anything nefarious going on, and actually the math from those viral tweets actually makes me think more that there's nothing nefarious going on. Actually, when I really look at the numbers and think about them, from different angles, the numbers actually make me think it's unlikely, actually. So that's one thing. But regardless of that point, the second point, and the one that I think is more important, that should be discussed more, is the need for transparency in the industry, in the production process, distribution process. So one of the things I just wanted to mention, I actually appreciated the approach that Sports Card Radio took in their live stream. I didn't watch the whole thing, but they didn't come into it jumping on the bandwagon of this is nefarious. They came in with it with a exploration mindset, and I appreciated that, because I find that in relation to this and in relation to a lot of things in sports cards, but not just in sports cards and other things. People are quick to be armchair experts, are quick to jump on a particular perspective of saying it is nefarious or it isn't nefarious without really having looked at it closely and explore the nuance and explore, what is the information we have, what is the information we don't have, what is the math telling us, but what is the math missing in the story, because math is of course, math is true, but you can choose and pick and choose certain things within the math to create a narrative, and that happens sometimes as well. So I feel like it's the kind of thing where it's clear to me that based on what we've seen, based on the math, it's enough to warrant looking at it closer. And when we see things that are potentially suspect, we should look at it closer. It's important that we look at it closer, but at the same time, we shouldn't automatically think that there's something nefarious going on when there is nothing deep enough to really prove it. And in this circumstance, I don't feel like there's anything deep enough. There's all these kind of perspectives, and there's all kinds of people who quickly jumped to either point the finger or to defend so quickly without really exploring it. And I feel like this kind of approach to things is a problem, in relation to sports cards, but in relation to so much, in relation to international politics, and in relation to everything, really. People are really quick to jump on something if it fits within their preconceived notion of what's going to happen. And you could see that so clearly with the narratives around this. So many people were quick to jump on, yes, this is absolutely nefarious, but it was people who were already in the mindset of expecting that. And there was other people who were quick to jump on defending them. And it was people that had some reason, some connection or the customers or something like that. It was like both sides of things just quickly jumped to an opinion that was quite strong, and I feel like, in order to come to an educated opinion, you have to take some time to analyze the situation. So many people had opinions on the math while they were just saying, I don't really understand the math, but blah 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 blah. But the math is telling us that this is very definitive, or I don't really understand the situation, but I have this opinion. Blah 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 blah. Like, I don't really fully understand how you can come up with an opinion at all until you know something more about the situation. I feel like people, I don't know, this is a cultural thing. Like, people want to jump to their opinion as long as it fits within the narratives that they've created around their own framework of things. And whatever that framework is, that's where their opinion is going to be. And it will take effort to shift them out of that initial opinion. And I feel like that kind of prejudging of something before exploring something happens way too often, and it's just kind of ridiculous to me. But it's like, it's become so common. It's like, how can you come up with an opinion before you've really had the chance to see the whole picture and to analyze the situation? Even me right now, there's other things I could probably say in relation to this whole scenario, but I feel like I wouldn't be doing it justice without more knowledge of things. Like the math, for example. I do see what the math was trying to say, but I also see all kinds of things the math could potentially be missing, and analyze it and see what are the angles that nobody's talking about. Because sometimes when it comes to this sort of thing, people jump on a certain perspective and they don't think about it beyond a limited, narrow view of the situation. And that happens so frequently. Whether you think it's nefarious or not nefarious, so often people are narrow in how they're looking at it. And that's what I've been noticing with a lot of the dialogue around it on YouTube since it's jumped off, is whoever's talking about it is talking within a very narrow set of perspectives that I feel doesn't do justice to being able to understand the whole thing. I mean, I understand that's part of the point of conversation. Conversation helps to open up some of those different understandings and to get different perspectives from different people. Helps us each to widen our view. But when people's views are expressed in such a way that is so certain or so very clearly defined along a certain set of parameters. I feel like it limits the ability for people to explore and discover the truth of the situation, because they're just trying to find the things that fit into a narrative they've already decided on. And that happens so often. In politics, it happens more than anywhere. Like when you look at the situation in the US of, the right wing and the left wing, and the way that they communicate with each other, and the way that the news stations work, and the way that just narratives are drawn, it's like everybody has a narrative they create, and then they fit the facts around that narrative, and it happens again and again. And the facts are true in all of those different circumstances, but facts, when they're not in the context and are not understood within the wider context, and not seen within the connection of all the other facts and the complexity of it, and people look at things in a simplified way, then they're not understanding the fullness of the situation. And that, I feel like that's exactly what happened in relation to this backyard breaks thing. I mean, people have people either like them or don't like them, and everybody either likes them or don't like them. I would never ever choose to break with them. Never. I don't like their approach. I don't like the way they're doing it. But I still think it's ridiculous to jump on them for thinking that this is actually a nefarious thing, to jump on them so quickly. I think it's perfectly okay to explore. I think it's perfectly okay to take a much closer look. I think it's perfectly okay to question, the possibilities, to see that there is incentive, to see that there is a system that's in place that makes it so that it's totally possible for somebody, even if this isn't nefarious in this case. I can clearly see now that if somebody wanted to do something nefarious and do a kickback to, let's say it is hand packed in the factory, and to do some kind of kickback to the person packing it to mark a certain box, and then also some kind of something or another with the distributor to make sure you get that box. Like, I could see how it could be done, because I'm more clear now about how everything lacks transparency, So if nothing else, I've really taken that away from this, that we need more transparency. But beyond that, I think it's crazy that people have such strong opinions on something that there's no way objectively that you can know the truth in this circumstance. But people have such strong opinions about it. And how can you have, it's hard for me to wrap my mind, I keep repeating that point, but how can you have a strong opinion about something when you can only see the tiniest little bit of it? And then you paint, it's almost like there's a line or two, and then you just connect all the rest of the dots in your own mind, without realizing that actually the picture that was going to come together was going to be something completely different. And then you just say, yes, this is correct. My framework, my way of looking at it is correct. It seems like that's happening within this dialogue of different spaces. So anyway, I've gone way off of the topic, but since I'm just driving along, I'm kind of just chatting, since you can't talk back to me, I'm just chatting. I hope you enjoyed this bit of the drive. Maybe you some very beautiful views. So even if you didn't enjoy what I had to say, how could you not enjoy this beautiful view? But anyway, let me know in the comments below what you think, if you, just in general, and share some nuance in your thoughts. I do invite you, if you have a deeper kind of thought, I've mentioned before that I've started a publication for written articles on Medium, that's medium.com, that's specifically for sports cards. It doesn't have much of a following now, but I'm kind of thinking that if people have thoughts about different things, it's a nice forum for writing something a little bit more deep that wouldn't just fit into a YouTube comment. And then if you wanted to put it on my publication, just let me know. I can add you as a writer, and then you can write stuff and put it on your publication. You can actually monetize your articles on Medium as well. So if you do that, then you can share your thoughts with a little bit more depth. And if you get enough people following your channel, following your articles, then you can even make a little bit of money from it as well. So it's just a suggestion I have for you if you have different thoughts about some of these topics and you'd like to share them, because I feel like it's hard to have a dialogue within just this space. It's one of the things I liked about the sports card radio, how they were bringing on so many different people on their live stream, there was more opportunity for actually having discussions and exploring something together, which I like. So they have a platform where they're able to bring together a couple thousand people, so they can actually create some spaces for dialogue. So we'll see what they do with that into the future. It's clear that they have the influence to be able to, and the audience to be able to get people together to talk about stuff. We'll just have to see what they do with that, and if they use their powers for good or evil. I do invite you to go to Medium and write some articles too about this topic and other sports card related topics. If you have more in-depth thoughts, I'll definitely read it myself and let you know my thoughts on it, because I like just discussing things and talking about topics related to the hobby. So anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.